A young girl vanished in the dead of winter from a house full of people, and no one heard a sound. It was January 1996. The town of Bolingbrook, Illinois was locked in a deep freeze. Snow had fallen for 3 days straight, piling up on rooftops, sidewalks, and in the memories of those who lived through it. Rachel Mellon was 13. She'd caught a mild cold, so her mom let her stay home from school and rest upstairs in her bedroom. Her stepfather later told police that when he took the dog for a walk, Rachel was still asleep. But when he came back, she was gone. No screams. No signs of a struggle. No shoes. No coat. Just an empty room, missing a young girl, and a blue blanket that disappeared with her. 2 pillows from the bed were missing too. And the most haunting part? It took more than 7 hours before anyone called the police. Rachel Marie Mellon was born on October 13, 1982, right in the heart of fall in Illinois. To her classmates, Rachel was the quiet kind of smart, the friendly kid who didn't need to be the center of attention. She loved environmental science, once won a biology competition at school, and dreamed of one day working for Greenpeace. Bolingbrook, the town where she grew up, wasn't the kind of place where much happened. Straight roads, quiet neighborhoods, and winters that blanketed little houses like something out of a postcard. But behind every front door, there are stories people don't want to tell. From the outside, Rachel's family looked like your typical American household, a mom, a stepdad, and a little sister. But inside that house, things weren't as peaceful as the snow on the rooftop. Rachel had lived with her mom, Amy, ever since Amy split from her first husband, Jeff Skemp. Jeff still called, sent gifts, and tried to stay in touch. But the distance and Amy's new life with her second husband, Vincent Mellon, slowly pushed Rachel to the sidelines of her own family. Still, she tried to act like everything was fine. At school, she turned in her assignments on time and was rarely late. She loved books, especially adventure novels, and carried a Walkman everywhere, usually playing Alanis Morissette. Friends remembered her once saying, "Sometimes I wish I could live in the woods. Just me and nature. It'd be quieter that way." No one really knew what she meant. But when Rachel disappeared, her Walkman was still playing. It was sitting right by her bed. The song mid-play, hand in my pocket, a track full of contradictions. Just like her life. Vincent Mellon, Rachel's stepfather, was once a mechanic, a big, quiet man who switched jobs often. Later, neighbors would say they sometimes heard shouting coming from the Mellons' home. But back then, nobody said anything because, well, don't all families fight? Rachel never felt safe around Vincent. In a diary found after she vanished, she wrote, "I don't want to be home when he's around. He looks at me weird. One time, he put his hand on my shoulder when no one was around. It made my skin crawl." In another entry, she said she kept a small knife hidden under her pillow at night. Even more disturbing, a children's book titled Daddy Kisses was found in her room, with strange passages underlined and marked. Her mother was the one who discovered it. Amy had once filed a restraining order against Vincent in 1993 after a fight turned violent, but she later withdrew it, and life just continued. Rachel went on living between 2 worlds. On one side, a mother who perhaps didn't want to see what was happening. On the other, a father, Jeff Skemp, who could only reach her by phone. In a letter never sent, Rachel had written to him, "I'm okay, but if one day I stop calling, it's not because I disappeared, it's because I can't." No one saw that letter in time. In the end, it wasn't a scream that shattered everything. It was the silence, longer than usual. There's one more thing, something even her family didn't know. Rachel once called a teen crisis hotline. She didn't give her real name. The call lasted less than 4 minutes. And that was the last time anyone outside her home ever heard Rachel's voice, alive. January 31st, 1996. Bolingbrook was frozen to the bone. Temperatures had plunged to 4-degree Fahrenheit, and icy winds rattled the windows like whispers in the dark. Schools were still open, but Rachel stayed home. Her mom let her rest because of a mild sore throat. Around 8 a.m., Amy left for work. That left just Rachel and her stepfather, Vincent, alone in the house. Rachel was wearing pajamas, wrapped in her blue blanket, and playing Nintendo on the downstairs sofa. Around 10 a.m., Vincent said he took the dog out for a walk, about 20 to 30 minutes. When he left, Rachel was still lying there, bundled up and resting. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But when he came back, the house was too quiet. No footsteps, no video game sounds, no reluctant little daddy, like Rachel sometimes said. She was gone. No goodbye, No sign, no trace. But Vincent didn't call the police. He claimed he thought Rachel had just stepped outside for a walk, maybe gone to a friend's. But on a day that cold, with bare feet and no coat, it wasn't until 6:45 p.m., almost 9 hours after she was last seen, that anyone picked up the phone. And it wasn't Vincent. It was her mother, Amy, calling the moment she got home and realized Rachel was missing. The house was warm. The windows were closed. The front door showed no signs of forced entry. But Rachel's room was empty. Her Walkman was still on, quietly playing music by her bed. Her purse and shoes were untouched. Her coat still hung neatly on the hook. Only her blue blanket and 2 pillows were missing. And no one, not a single person, could remember the last time they actually saw Rachel alive. By the time police arrived, it was nearly 7 p.m. The wind cut through the air. Snow covered the porch and front walk, but there were no footprints in the snow, only the dogs. Vincent greeted officers with a calm but concerned expression. He repeated his story. He'd gone out for a 25 to 30-minute walk, maybe a bit longer. He couldn't be sure. When he returned, Rachel was gone. He assumed she'd stepped out, maybe to a neighbor's. Police searched the house. No broken windows, no forced doors, no sign of a struggle. Her music still playing softly. Her coat, bag, and shoes untouched. Everything was just normal. Too normal. But one detail stuck out. The blue blanket and 2 pillows had vanished with Rachel. Why would someone leave, barefoot in freezing snow, and take a blanket and pillows, but not a coat? It didn't make sense. Vincent said he had no idea. But police quickly noticed something else. That time gap. That long time gap. Nearly 9 hours had passed. A child had gone missing, and nobody had called for help. Not because they forgot, but because maybe they didn't want to. That same night, the search began. Police canvassed the neighborhood with flashlights, combing bushes, checking every backyard. They knocked on every door in that quiet street, where most folks knew each other by name. But almost no one knew Rachel. She had lived there over 5 years, yet most neighbors couldn't recall the last time they'd even spoken to her. Police asked, had anyone seen Rachel arguing with her mom? With Vincent? Heads shook. Some people looked down. One woman whispered, "Sometimes I heard yelling, but I thought it was just family stuff." Amy, when questioned, seemed tired. She didn't cry, didn't yell. She said Rachel could be moody sometimes, might have run off for a few hours. She claimed to know nothing about the diary, nothing about the knife under the pillow. When asked to help with the neighborhood search, she declined. "I'm exhausted. I don't think I'd be any help." Police grew uneasy. But suspicion isn't evidence. There was no body, no blood, no camera footage. It was 1996. Most homes didn't have security cameras, and cell phones weren't common yet. There was just emptiness. Rachel's biological father, Jeff Skemp, drove straight from Wisconsin to Illinois that very night. When he arrived, he asked if they had checked the trunk, the garage, the basement. They said they had, but he didn't believe them. "I feel like she's still nearby, not far away." From that day on, Jeff became the only person who kept searching every year. The other side of the family? They moved away from Bolingbrook less than 2 months after Rachel disappeared. Later, an investigator found a small piece of paper behind Rachel's desk. On it, in messy handwriting, were the words, "If Mom doesn't believe me, who will? No one knows when she wrote it." But they kept that note, as proof that once Rachel tried to speak up. The morning after Rachel vanished, police brought in Vincent Mellon, her stepfather, for questioning. They asked him to recount, minute by minute, what had happened that day. Vincent claimed he woke up around 9:45 a.m. and had breakfast with Rachel. Then around 10:15, he took the dog out for a walk. He said he was gone for 25 to 30 minutes, maybe longer, because the snow was thick. But when pressed to map out his exact route, Vincent hesitated. At first, he said he walked around the block. Then he changed his story, said he went all the way to a nearby park. Yet no one saw him outside that day, and strangely, his shoes showed no signs of snow at all. Police also noticed a long scratch on his left wrist. Vincent said the dog had clawed him while pulling on the leash. But the cut was deep, about 2 inches, and didn't look like an animal scratch. When officers asked to see the clothes he'd worn that morning, Vincent told them he had already washed them. It was a freezing winter day, A 13-year-old girl had just gone missing, and the only person home during that time had already done laundry just hours later. A few days later, during an extended search of the property, investigators made a chilling discovery. Buried shallowly behind the backyard fence was a small paring knife. The blade was worn, and there was something dry and hardened on it. At the time, DNA testing wasn't conclusive. Technology simply wasn't advanced enough. But by 2000, when the case was reopened, that knife became a central piece of suspicion. Still, there was no solid evidence to press charges. No body, no eyewitness, no surveillance. Just too many things. That didn't add up. One detective wrote in a report, "It felt like the entire house had been cleaned thoroughly in a very short amount of time. Too clean, too quiet." Quiet. That word shows up more than any other in the case file. And it may be the most terrifying thing of all. Nearly 2 weeks after Rachel disappeared, police returned to canvass the neighborhood again, this time asking deeper questions about strange sounds, unusual behavior, things people might have brushed off. One woman, who lived right next door, finally broke her silence. "That wasn't a happy house. Every time I heard yelling, I'd take my headphones off just to confirm it was still happening." A classmate of Rachel's recalled seeing a faint bruise on her arm once. When asked, Rachel had just smiled and said, "Our dog scratched me." Police requested another search of Rachel's room, this time more thorough. And behind a loose panel in her dresser drawer, they found a thin notebook. Not a full diary, just scattered, scribbled thoughts. One entry read, "Last night, he stood at my bedroom door. Didn't say anything, just stared. I pretended to be asleep, but I had my hand on the knife under my pillow." Another, "Mom doesn't look at me anymore. Every time I speak, she turns away, like I'm something that makes her feel guilty." These weren't accusations. They were the quiet voice of someone trying to be heard and never quite reaching anyone. In a private conversation with Rachel's closest friend, the girl shared something she'd never told police. One time, Rachel said if she ever disappeared, it might not be a joke. We thought she was kidding. But no one called the police sooner. No one told a teacher. No one, not even the adults, ever asked, "Is something wrong?" Everyone assumed, no proof, no problem. In 2020, a retired officer from the original investigation said, "If this case happened today, with security cameras, smartphones, GPS data, I'm convinced of one thing. Rachel wouldn't have gone forgotten for this long." In the year 2000, 4 years after Rachel disappeared, the Will County Sheriff's Office reopened the case. The decision came after a young detective, newly assigned, read through the entire original file and realized far too much had been overlooked. This time, all eyes turned to one person, Vincent Mellon. He was asked to return for a polygraph test. Vincent agreed, but he failed, not once, but all 3 times. Each test flagged deception when he was asked about the last time he saw Rachel alive. At one point, an investigator asked him directly, "Did you hurt Rachel?" Vincent lowered his head, took a deep breath, and said nothing. His lawyer immediately stepped in and ended the interview. Vincent left the station in silence. He never cooperated again. Digging deeper into his background, police uncovered something disturbing. Just 3 months before Rachel vanished, Vincent had been accused of inappropriate conduct toward a teenage girl in a nearby neighborhood. The case was dropped. There wasn't enough evidence, and the accuser refused to testify. But the girl's initial statement sounded eerily similar to Rachel's own handwritten notes. Investigators also found out something else. On the afternoon Rachel went missing, Vincent briefly stopped by the auto shop where he used to work. But in the original report, he claimed he'd been home all day. Why lie? A former coworker later said, "He came in, looked around, didn't say a word, stayed maybe 2 minutes, then left. I thought it was weird, but no one was thinking about Rachel yet." Detectives circled back to Amy, Rachel's mother. Her response hadn't changed. "Vincent didn't do anything. He's a good man." And just like in 1996, she refused to allow a search of their former home. But this time, police had a warrant. In 2001, armed with legal authorization, investigators returned to the house where Rachel had once lived. Vincent and Amy had long since moved out. The current homeowner allowed police full access, from basement to attic to the old garage. At first, nothing seemed unusual, until they opened a built-in wooden cabinet inside the garage wall. There, coated in dust, was a brown paper bag, clearly untouched for years. Inside, a faded scrap of blue blanket fabric, the same kind Rachel used to sleep with. It had a tear in one corner, and tangled in the fibers, strands of reddish hair. A worn pillow without a case was also found, tucked beneath the floorboards near the wall. The items were immediately sent for forensic testing. But once again, the early 2000s offered no breakthroughs. The fabric was too degraded, the results too inconclusive. No definitive DNA match. No charges. Just a gut feeling. One investigator wrote in his report, "It felt like someone had cleaned up everything, except for this bag, like it was hidden quickly and then forgotten. Or maybe they thought no one would ever look again." But with no legal certainty, the DA's office couldn't prosecute. Vincent wasn't arrested. No one was charged. When news of the bag and the blanket fragment broke, Rachel's biological father, Jeff, wept reading the article. He said, "That's her blanket. I know it. I used to tuck her in with it 100 times." The truth, whatever it was, had once been inside that house. But time, delays, and the gaps in the justice system had let it slip away. In 2003, police received an anonymous letter from someone who once worked with Vincent at the repair shop. It read, "One day during lunch, he said, if someone disappears and nobody cares enough to look, maybe they were already gone long before." I didn't know what he meant back then, but now it chills me to the bone. As the years went by, Vincent moved away, changed his name, and lived quietly. Amy, Rachel's mother, never gave another interview. Every time the media mentioned the case, she refused to comment. Jeff, Rachel's biological father, remained the only voice still echoing year after year on Rachel's birthday. But after nearly a decade, even he began to realize the system had stopped placing his daughter's case anywhere near the top of the list. The investigation faded, until 2005, when an unexpected tip changed everything. A woman who had once dated Vincent called the tip line. She said that during a heated argument, he once told her, "I know how to make someone disappear. Trust me. Once is enough to keep anyone from ever looking again." She also recalled a small wooden box he kept locked and never let anyone touch. But without physical evidence, her statement wasn't enough to reopen charges. Around the same time, a new theory began to form. An independent investigative journalist, combing through old files, noticed a detail that had been forgotten. A strange white truck had been parked in front of Rachel's house for 3 days in a row just before she vanished. One neighbor had written down the license plate. But in the case file, that note was only noted. It was never investigated further. The plate belonged to a man who had delivered parts to the auto shop where Vincent once worked. That man had a criminal record, including past arrests for attempting to contact minors. By the time police tracked him down, it was too late. He had died in a car crash in 2001. Every lead ended in a dead end. A retired investigator said later, "At one point, I thought we knew who did it. I really did. But then it all slipped away, like snow melting under the midday sun. Every theory that once seemed solid had a crack. And in the silence that stretched for too long, the truth seemed to have slipped away unnoticed." In 2009, Rachel's case was officially labeled a cold case. No active budget. No assigned detective. Just files, boxed and shelved in storage. Jeff still called the station every month. He always asked, "Anything new?" And always heard the same answer, "We're still reviewing." But he knew no one was reviewing anything. The community grew quiet too. The people who once shared her photo, stapled flyers to telephone poles, they moved on, moved houses, had families, found peace elsewhere. People can't live forever inside someone else's grief. Only a small group remained, strangers on Reddit, on cold case forums, quietly piecing together scraps. One user once wrote, "If Rachel had been the daughter of a rich, famous white family, I don't think this case would have been forgotten like this." It was a cold truth, but not a wrong one. An internal survey at the Bolingbrook Police Department in 2010 revealed a troubling pattern. Of more than 20 local missing persons cases from 1980 to 2000, those involving white, middle to upper class victims were 2.4 times more likely to be solved than those involving people of color or from low-income households. Rachel, brown-haired, daughter of a single mother with an unstable home and a stepfather with a criminal past, may have been placed in the wrong category from day one. In her one and only interview in 2011, Amy simply said, "I have nothing more to say. I lost my daughter, and I've also lost my faith in people." Some saw that as heartbreak, others avoidance. In 2019, a Bolingbrook high school student chose Rachel's case for a social studies project. When she called the police department to ask for information, the person on the line replied, "Rachel who? Oh, that case from the 90s? There were tons like that back then." And that's when the student understood some names, if no one holds on to them, they disappear, as if they never existed at all. Rachel Marie Mellon, born in 1982, vanished in 1996. No evidence, no body, no charges. No one knows for certain what happened. But what's just as true, nearly 30 years later, is that no one can say they truly did everything they could. Her name sits quietly on the Charlie Project website, labeled Endangered Missing. Each year, a small circle of strangers continues to share her story. Old classmates, now parents themselves, sometimes mention Rachel as a shadow from their childhood. They remember her as a kind, gentle girl who loved biology and the outdoors. A girl who once said, "Some days I just wish I could sit somewhere quiet where no one could find me, so I could breathe." No one knows. Maybe she finally found that place. Vincent, her stepfather, now lives in another state. He's never been charged, never confessed. Amy, her mother, vanished from the public eye after 2012. Rachel's birthday comes and goes each year in silence. Only Jeff, her father, still writes her letters. He mails them to an address he knows will never write back. In a rare interview, he once looked straight into the camera and said, "I don't care who's guilty. I just want her to know someone's still waiting for her." And perhaps the most heartbreaking part of this story isn't just that Rachel disappeared. It's that she once tried to speak up and no one listened. The cold that day didn't just come from the snow. It came from the silence of a town, of a system, of people who thought, "It's not my place to interfere." If today is the first time you've heard Rachel's name and you feel like you've lost someone you never met, you're not alone. If you were once a child with something to say, but no one listened, if you've ever lived in a house where everything seemed fine, but you couldn't breathe from the weight of it, if you know the feeling of being ignored, unheard, or doubted when all you needed was to be believed, leave a comment. Me too. Not for Rachel to read, not for anyone to reply, but so the people still living know they're not alone. And stories like Rachel's will never be forgotten. Rachel Marie Mellon, 1982. We're still looking for you.